Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast. I'm your co-host, Thomas Vick, joined by my co-host, Seth Wilson. Seth, how's it going today?
Thomas, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am doing well. Looking forward to this episode of the podcast. We have a special guest, Michael Robinson, who is an attorney in Virginia, and we're looking forward to kind of talking with him about his story and how he started his own law practice. This is a classmate of yours from law school, so looking forward to learning more about Michael's journey.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous, honestly, because Michael has knowledge about me from years ago that in class answers and stuff, whether my, facade for the last 20 years is going to come down today, we'll find out. But
Yeah,
no,
love to.
really excited to have Michael here. And Michael, just why don't you introduce yourself and kind of tell us where you're from, where your office is, and then we're going to just ask you some questions about your journey.
Certainly, and thank you guys, and appreciate you both inviting me onto your podcast. Again, I'm Michael Robinson. I'm a Virginia attorney since 2006. Seth and I did go to law school together, and that's where we met. And he had to spend 3 years with me and my shenanigans, and so and he invited me on here. So apparently, it wasn't that bad, or maybe he lost his memory, but the bar in 2006. Thank goodness it was a first time test taker, first time pass. So that takes a lot of pressure off of you, especially when you're married and your wife kind of financially supports you through law school. So you kind of you have a lot of, like I said, a lot of pressure. But I passed it the first time and started my career in the Newport News Commonwealth Attorney's Office, where I was on the juvenile and domestic relations team. Kind of threw me the first order of business. I was first hired under a grant position to prosecute domestic violence, and that lasted. I honestly don't recall how long that lasted, but then that transitioned into more of a not a grant position. And then that a lot, it's still assigned to the juvenile domestic relations team, and I don't want to go too far down that road. But nonetheless, Newport News is inner city, so a lot of youth is committing a lot of violent crime. There's unfortunately, a lot of sex crimes committed against children. So that part of my life, it was a lot of experience that I was able to obtain really quickly, and then my wife accepted a position in Northern Virginia, so I transferred to the Fauquier County Commonwealth Attorney's Office, still prosecuting, and that was in all three courts in Virginia. They have a juvenile domestic relations court, a general district court, and a circuit court, which is the trial court system, probably similar to your state. And I think and then after that, I started Robinson Law. So I tried to steamroll through that real quick,
Yeah.
specifics, but that's kind of a few years later than before kids and all of that. I was just in that position where we had, and I tell people this all the time, we had a Honda Civic that we couldn't afford. And I love prosecuting, but it didn't pay well at the time. The highest salary I had was $57,000 in the prosecution world. And that might be a lot. I'm not trying to suggest it is or is not a lot, but there was a light in a Honda Civic, that check engine light, that we just didn't have the money to take care of. And so maybe it was just, I don't know, maybe it's just arrogance or stupidity, a combination of everything. And we didn't have children. And I just told my wife I want to start my own firm. And she was supportive. And here we are 20 years later. That is real quick in a nutshell how that whole thing started.
Wow. Inspiration by a broken light. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. It was pretty much that simple. And I was like, we're just not, I love prosecuting, and I love my mentors that I met along the way. And it was just a situation where, I just thought, I think I can do this differently. And, maybe I'll go back to prosecution when it's all said and done, because I loved it so much. And the people I met along the way are priceless to me. So.
Well, so many great points there, Drew. Like, what's so neat about that is you can get out of school and you have that massive hurdle still to get through called the bar exam before you can ever represent a client. And you got to get through that hurdle. And then you got to get the first job. And then you got to get into court. And it's just such a process by which I had the same kind of experience where I was sort of thrown into practice right away. And you learn a ton of stuff going through that, which then builds that foundation to say, maybe I can do this on my own. And it's so encouraging, because I think there's a lot of us who, if we don't go back and think about all the stair steps that we've had to climb to go through the process, you can take that for granted very easily.
Well, certainly, certainly. I know, and thinking about this podcast and the kind of the subject matter you were looking to discuss, I also know that when we moved to Northern Virginia, Fairfax County is the biggest jurisdiction in Virginia. It has over 1 million people in the county, so it's one of those really robust counties that I'm sure you've almost everybody in the world's heard of Fairfax County if you're from the United States at some point or another. And I remember the first time I walked into the courthouse, it reminded me of a DMV, and I wasn't used to it, where you have the TV screens, and it's almost like the terminal where you see things flipping, and airport, departing planes, arriving planes. And I went home and I told my wife, and I said, I don't know if I can handle this here. This is too big. This is too much. It's just like sensory overload. They have courts on 5 different floors. I mean, it was just one of those situations. It was so overwhelming to me. And my wife kind of calmed me down and said, day by day by day, So, and it really started that slowly. I knew no one in the county. I knew no prosecutor. I knew no defense attorney. And it was just a day by day kind of situation. Every day you kind of learn and build on it and move on to the next day, the next day, the next day. So no mentors, no local knowledge. No, I didn't know. It was just really, it really was a trial by fire ordeal. And I know if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's just hard work. It's just getting up every day and rinse, repeat, and just follow the process. And every day you learn a little bit more about what to do, what not to do, forming your, it was really, looking back on it now, as a special experience, even though at the time it was pretty scary. But like I said, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
That's amazing that you were able to start your practice in an area where you didn't know anybody. Whenever I talk about, starting my own practice, of course, I went to law school close to where you and Seth went to law school at, I went to Liberty University School of Law, but I didn't really know anybody in the legal field in Virginia. I grew up here on the south side of Indianapolis. And so I decided, if I'm going to start my own law practice, I better do it back home where, at least a few people know
Right.
me. So I mean, how did you kind of break through that? How did you start to get to know people? How did you kind of start to make connections with folks in
Right.
that new area?
I don't recall the moment that I felt comfortable. I certainly feel comfortable now in Fairfax because a lot of the judges now I grew up with. And so that makes things a lot easier when we both kind of went through, either some of the judges on the civil side, I don't know as well, but it's certainly the criminal guys and gals. We were in the trenches together for years, and so happy to see them ascend to that, to that position. But so now I'm much more comfortable. I don't recall the moment. I think it's just after, at least in our court system, you have to wait to meet with a prosecutor. Okay. And I don't know if that's how it works there, but if you have an attorney, if you hire an attorney, the prosecutor usually waits in an area, and the attorneys line up to go and talk to a prosecutor. Well, after so many years and so many hours you're spending there waiting to talk to a prosecutor, you meet everybody. You slowly but surely meet everybody. And quite frankly, what I tell my colleagues, if my wife knew how little work I did every single day, it's just kind of talking to your colleagues, because once you get to the prosecutor, then you actually do work. But up until that point, you're just kind of just catching up with your friends. And so that is kind of the best part of the job, though, is that you get to the camaraderie of the profession when you're in court. So, I mean, I don't know exactly how long it took, but slowly but surely you start meeting everybody, and you start sharing war stories, or, you go back and forth with how would you, what about this judge? You didn't know the judges either. And so, and some of the, he's like, well, what do you think this judge would do on this issue? And the one thing about it is, and I think it's probably true everywhere, attorneys will help you. They will help you get acclimated. If you have a question, there are enough good people out there. Very, very few people that a handful of people maybe in my entire career that have not been helpful. Really a handful. Everybody else, if you have an issue, if you have a problem, if you have a question, they will come and help you. That's one good thing about this profession that I have found, that if I have a question about a legal issue, if I have a question about a client issue, which could be a legal issue, it might not. It could be like, hey, how have you dealt with this problem client? It could have nothing to do with the balls and strikes of a case, or a judge, or anything else in between. There usually is not only one but 10 attorneys that will help you out and answer a question. If you need to look at a contract language, say, hey, listen, I've got this kind of weird thing coming in. Have you ever dealt with this before? They'll flock to help you. And that's what's great about my situation, at least looking back on it.
Yeah, and I would agree as far as Indiana lawyers are the same way. Seth and I work in Indiana, and the Indiana State Bar Association is well connected, and you're able to ask questions and people respond here in
Yeah.
Indiana. You've got a listserv that you can send an email out with a question, and
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
people will call you directly and say, "Oh, I saw your post, and
Yeah.
here's my experience, and I'd love to help you with that kind of
Yeah.
thing." So. Yeah.
Same experience, and it's just the stuff about starting a law firm. It's just the stuff in between that you just have to figure out on your own. Like, no one is going to tell you where your revenue streams are coming from, right? I mean, you're not going to go and say, hey, stranger attorney, how do you make money? It's fairly obvious that you need to make money somewhere. And so that, looking back on it, things you have to tell the world you're there, right? Like a website. And a website back in 2008 is not the same as a website now. And the dynamics are different. And I remember my wife and I sat down, more her than me, certainly. I came up with content, but she kind of did the rest and made this kind of really generic, static website that probably didn't on today's versions of websites would not even, it would probably be putrid. But nonetheless, you have to let the world know you're there. You have to have some sort of situation. You have to build that for yourself, and that could take a lot of different angles, as you guys know. I mean, you could put a lot of money into these things, and you could have a 100-page website. You could have a 1-page website. So you just got to look at your budget. And I have some notes in front of me, and about looking back on them. How did I view things? How did I see things? Office space. And
I was going to ask, first started, did you start renting space? Some criminal defense attorneys decide, I don't really need one. I'll just meet with clients at the courthouse. What was your?
I was more old school. I went, my first office, it wasn't anywhere near a courthouse, which I've always associated. And I feel like the older I've gotten in this profession, or the more experienced, I feel like people associate success with proximity to the courthouse. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but when I first started, I was so far away from the courthouse because that's all I could afford. And I remember it's $550 a month. That was my rent. And so when I
Northern Virginia, which is amazing.
It wasn't a big office.
Yeah.
It was like a 10 by 10. And it was, looking back on it, I was lucky. I was lucky just to get, I was lucky to kind of get to that next level. And my next office, I think, was $1,100 a month. And I went and literally had to really think long. And I'm like, man, this is, because you have to worry about OpEx, your operational expenses, and, and the cost of everything. And so I'm kind of a worrier that way. And that was the biggest, that was a thing, and I'm like, I talked to my wife, like, how can I afford this? It's $1,100 a month. And, and it was a couple days struggle to try to pull that trigger. Again, this is years and years and years ago, but I remember it, looking back on it fondly, but I'm sure it wasn't I'm sure it was a nerve-wracking thing. But so yeah, anyway, that was, it's $550 a month, and I was nowhere near the courthouse, but somehow we made it work.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so as you were thinking about that at that time, in terms of, I'm trying to make this decision, right? I know I have a vision for what needs to be, and I need to figure out how to get there. What were some of your thoughts about, okay, if I have this many clients at this many rates, or did you even go down that road as you were trying to make the decision about the office space?
No, I wasn't smart enough to kind of do that. I honestly, I did not look at it that way. I just said, I'm going to get up every morning and work my butt off. That's kind of what it was. I wasn't analytical like that. I wasn't a metric. I'm more metric driven now than then. And I think I was just dumb enough to say, I'm just going to commit to this lifestyle where I'm just going to do everything I can. Of course, I got on the court appointed list for those revenue streams, the guardian ad litem list. So I was doing everything I can to pull it in. And I'm like, if I can just get some revenue coming in and then figure out the rest as I go. And we have a joke around the firm now. It's like we build it as we fly it. And that's kind of the way I was then. I'm like, look, the airplane's taxiing down. We're getting ready to take off. We're still trying to install the wing, but we just kind of slowly figured it out. And I don't know if Seth, if you took law practice management in law school, they scare you to death about having, all the money in the bank in the world to try to start these firms. And I don't disagree with it, but sometimes it's not that perfect. It's not that perfect of a setup where, hey, I'm going to start my firm. I have $300,000 in the bank, just in disposable income,
Right.
and and I'm going to set aside $200,000 in marketing, and it's just, I think you do it, and you have to believe in yourself, and you just have to commit to your work ethic and have that ethos, and usually it'll work out.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, because there is so much out there of, hey, here's the model, here's the structure, here's the do this. You got to have this level of technology. You've got to have this level of experience. And
Right.
ultimately, it comes down to the drive of the individual. And if that
Right.
individual says, I'm committed, I'm going to make this work no matter what, and I just feel this call to do this and to be out and go. And then as time goes on, you get some perspective, but at that first moment that when you're the founder, when you're launching, I got to go all in. We talk about this recently in a series at our church of calling it burning the ships. And it was kind of like, I'm going. I could always get another job or do something like that, but I'm committed, and there's not going to be any looking back, and I've got to go and give everything I can to make this happen. And as you see, it happens. Now, at what point did you start to get to the level to where you were like, okay, now we need to expand, or I do need an office space that's a little closer to the courthouse? What were some of the triggers that helped you on that journey?
Well, I think it was and one of the best, I guess the transition point was somebody finally told me, I don't recall who, because when you start your own firm, you're very cost conscious. And when I said about OpEx and CapEx, and you really, EBITDA or whatever, however you want to look at your financial metrics, and you're really cost conscious, and taking those extra steps like OpEx in a higher rent capacity or higher rent situation, you really think long and hard, because you have struggled and got to that point, and now you're ready to bite off a little bit of an extra piece. One of somebody, I don't recall when, it was almost a leap of faith, because they said, you need to bring on an assistant because you actually will make more. You will have more time to take on more, and I didn't believe it, because it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, wait a minute, I've got to pay a salary to somebody, and you're telling me that I'm going to actually be freed up enough to make more money. And it is actually true. And so the first assistant that I hired came out of a very unusual situation. And do you guys want to hear this part?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
It was actually our nanny, and our two daughters was born, and then she was transitioning out, and it was kind of one of these conversations in the kitchen one day. And I'm like, well, it was on my brain, and the person told me, so you need to hire an assistant. I'm like, well, I mean, if you want to kind of help me out a little bit, I mean, I guess, and it kind of we kind of stumbled into it. It wasn't like I didn't put out a job description. It was just kind of a stumbled into it. And I'll tell you, really caught lightning in a bottle on that one, because she was not only a doer, she was a thinker, and she was far smarter than I had anticipated. And so she was with me for a long time. And so she eventually went up to like an operations level, chief operations officer. I moved to Luxembourg with my family, and she basically was my operations lead on the ground. Like I said, that doesn't happen at all. But like I said, with that situation, I happened to catch lightning in a bottle, and that really catapulted me to another level. So because you have somebody that you trust, that is smart, that is capable, I could throw almost any problem in that direction, and it would be solved or close to being solved. So there is no strategy for hiring good people, because God knows I've hired 50 bad, I've hired so many people that just fizzled out quick. But with that situation specifically, it was a need for me to try to free up some time. And we like I said, it was a complete fortuitous stumbling into a conversation. It happened to work out. And I also have a note here in that, and I'm kind of, I don't know if that answers your question, but it enabled me in order to grow. And then we had this conversation between her and I. She, I would look, the way that through the years we kind of worked the firm was similar to a military setup: strategic, operational, and tactical. Okay, the attorneys are tactical. They're your boots on your boots on ground. They're the guys and girls that are going out there and getting the stuff done. Okay, like almost like infantry. And forgive the I don't mean to insult anybody if I am insult. Almost like your boots on ground infantry. Those are your attorneys. And then you have an operations segment where you have to make sure that the strategies and protocols and your CRM tools are followed. And somebody, so we would, and then you have the strategy, which I felt like I was, the more of the strategic person. So we would say somebody needs to be looking up and out, and then somebody needs to be looking down and in. And so that's how we kind of organized the firm. And so it really worked out. And then, everything was, that's how we worked it. She looked down and in, and I looked up and out.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then tell us a little bit about kind of where you stand today, what you do, what the practice areas of the firm are, and maybe what you're looking about at the future.
Yeah. Well, right now we have 2 offices, one in Fairfax, one in Fredericksburg. There are 3 attorneys. We have some of counsel folks that kind of help us out when there's overage, like when we just can't cover something, or we just need help, or it's just a certain specialty that just doesn't quite, we can't get to it. So we have a little bit of a blend there between the 2 attorneys. We're always hiring. That's one of the toughest things about a firm, is just to get to it's always, especially the criminal defense, it's a volume-based business. It's not for everybody. You just don't get one case and can just bill against it for 6 months. I mean, it's kind of a turn kind of thing. Every month's a brand new month metric wise, and you have to go after brand new business, which a lot of people love. A lot of people, I don't know. It's just something I've always done. But we're trying to make the transition to personal injury. And so we have an attorney and a staff that handles that, and we're making some inroads there. So hopefully 2026, we're going to kind of start looking into that funding, more of a marketing and funding towards that PI platform, and try to offset, some of our, not offset is kind of the wrong word, but try to, the criminal revenue side and the PI side, try to, start leveling that out, because again, I'm not, criminal is kind of a grind. It can be a grind. It's been a wonderful life for me. But sometimes you do want some office time too.
Yeah, well, I wish you the best of luck with the future and the transition to more personal injury type cases. It's amazing to see how much your law firm has grown from the time that you were in law school with Seth. I'm just kind of wondering, like, what is your daily routine? Like, what habits do you have that kind of make for a successful day for you?
Well, I didn't expect that question. Well, right now I live in Georgia. My wife is in the satellite industry, so I live in Georgia. I'm not in a day-to-day office in Fairfax or Fredericksburg. So really, in my role now, I've got to make sure the phones ring. That is one of my main goals, and I speak with our marketing folks daily. Not necessarily because things are wrong, but when things are right, and what the next steps are. And we look at web rankings, and we look at the next steps, and that's a really part of my day to day. If the phone doesn't ring, you can't, nothing else really matters. And so, and we do not do court appointed work anymore, and I'm not knocking that, but we are soliciting completely from the public, and there is a stress to that when you have to make that phone ring. And so my job is to try to make the phone ring. And then also we have to look at, once it does ring, how can we manage that process? And so that's a big part of, and I think any person that's looking to start a firm, I think that's a big issue, is that, okay, I've got a problem here. I need revenue. How am I going to get it? Okay. And if it's going to come from the general public, meaning I got to get the phone to ring, who's going to answer the phone? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be a call service? If it's a call service, it's going to be more money to pay that call service. And I know that there's something very interesting I've seen recently. There's an AI call service now that I think is very affordable, and you couldn't tell the difference. I thought this is fabulous, and I'm sure Seth can talk to that. You're the technology guy, so I was like, this is unbelievable. But and so we really look at capture, the capture process, and I look at it as try to strengthen that. And I hate to say it, before I went to law school, I sold cars. I hate to say that I sold cars, but I hate to say that sales is a part of this process in the legal world, as you guys know. What I meant to say, well, I hate to say it, but we are salespeople. And that's what I meant to say. I hate to say that everybody's in sales. We are salespeople. And so sales is a byproduct of what I do, and try to encourage my staff and my attorneys and tell them, listen, we're all in sales. We're all in business development. You're always on. If the phone rings, be the best representation of this firm, of yourself, So that kind of goes into my day to day. That's kind of what I think about when I wake up. And that's that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. When you're in law practice, you don't think about being in sales, but so much of it is. I mean, you're selling yourself and your services. And it doesn't matter what practice area you're in. Seth and I are focusing on estate planning. You're in criminal defense, moving into personal injury. It's just what value can you bring to the client, and communicating that in a way that's persuasive. And it's definitely something you got to work on.
That's not taught in law school. That the client perspective, at least the classes I took, it really wasn't necessarily a big component, and you don't know how you're going to deal with it. And I've noticed that. Yeah, I mean, we're all selling. You're selling a judge, you're selling a jury, you're selling a client, you're selling your children, you're selling. It's all persuasion. You're selling somebody on something all the time, whether you realize it or not. And I think I got that from a movie somewhere, but it's true. It is true. And so we would have sales meetings and talk about objections and overcoming objections. And since the podcast is about people who want to open up their own firms, that is a real, that's something I would encourage them to think about, is to say, okay, listen, that phone rings. I better know what to say. I better know how to give. Of course, you don't want to mislead, but you better give people hope. You better give them a plan. You better give them a strategy. You don't have to mislead, but you can say, this is how I'm going to approach this. And I would not open up a firm without having that in mind, to say, how am I going to communicate my plan in every case? If it's a bad case, if it's a horrible fact pattern, give them a plan, give them a plan of action. If it's a good case, and that makes your job even easier. But like I said, don't mislead, but give them hope and give them a plan. But anybody that wants to start a firm, that's what I would certainly have that thought in the back of my mind, to say, how am I going to sell my services?
And it's so important. I think your story today demonstrates one of the key components of our practice, which is action trumps everything. And you got to get up, you got to move, you got to have that plan, you got to be ahead of your client and help them through a process that they are relying on you to help them navigate. You can't come to them with more questions than they have. You can acknowledge that, hey, I don't know how this is going to work out, but here's the approach we're going to take. But that, I think, is such a vital thing, especially for younger lawyers who want to feel like they have all the answers, or feel like they should because they just graduated from law school and passed the bar. And no, you're taking someone from A to B to C, and you got to walk them through it and give them that, okay, I can breathe because I've got Michael on my side. I've got Thomas on my side. And a lot of the times they don't care what you know or how you know. They just know that you're going to be there with them and help them walk through and try to execute. And they need to be communicated to, and they need to be helped and have their questions answered and phone calls returned. Basic things that can set you apart from your competition very easily, even if you don't have all the answers. That's such a great point. Hey, I did want you to reiterate, because we were talking just before we started the call about the approach to marketing. Can you share that with the audience?
Sure. Which part respectively?
It was
right
working out.
Back in the day. Because there were two different approaches.
No. Kind of the analogy you heard it was said it was like working out.
Yeah. Marketing is a constant. It is in every day. even now, in my marketing point of contact is Chad, and I think that we're like best friends now because we talk daily through text or calls or anything else. Marketing is fairly fascinating, and it's like working out. That's what I said is that you can go to the gym for a month and you will look great on the and then if you stop going to the gym, you're going to fall off again, right? And that's the same thing with marketing. It's a day-to-day thing, and that is something that if you're going to be successful in any level of business, especially our business, which is so competitive, and you got to start thinking about why do people, you need to get the books and go to the blogs and figure out why people call you. Why do you rank well page wise? Page one. One of our attorneys years ago, she came in, she's a brilliant Phi Beta Kappa GW grad, just a brilliant young lady, and she came in and she said, "Hey, where do you hide a dead body?" I said, "What?" She just kind of threw me, and I said, "What? I don't understand." She said, "Where do you hide a dead body?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Page 2 of Google." I said, "Touche," and so I would. It's funny. I'm like, fair enough, but. In any event, I know marketing is a big deal, and I would not if I guess if I had to sum it all up, don't be afraid to market. If don't be afraid to spend money if you are betting on yourself. Okay, if you have the ethos, if you have the the ethic, the drive. If you're betting on yourself and that's your only bet and you're confident, do it. But if you have any blemishes, any problem with getting up out of bed, any problems with rolling up your sleeve, may not be what I suggest. But if you're betting on yourself and you're confident in your skills and most importantly your work ethic, if you can get up and get after it, then hey, if I can do it, you can do it.
And I can't think of a better way to end it than right there, Thomas. What do you think? Any other final questions for Michael?
No, I think that's a great place to end it right there. If you can think of doing anything else, if you got any kind of doubt in yourself, then maybe not, maybe don't hang a shingle for yourself. But
Yeah,
if you're confident, determined, then that's the way to go for sure.
I think that it's and I'm trying to think of all the little things, the little vignettes in my memory. If like I said, the biggest thing I would say, if you have an engine, you have a big engine and you're just ready to get after, and you can do it, you've practiced enough law to where you're not going to stumble. I would not, I wouldn't, if somebody purely right out of law school, like newly minted day 2 of your, that'd be nerve wracking. I'd say, hey, I'm sure, it can happen. But I had enough knowledge where I felt like I knew not to, I knew not to, what I needed generally to do. But moreover, if I was very confident that my work ethic would prevail, and I'm still here.
That's awesome. Hey, Michael, where can folks go to find out more about your firm?
The website generally it's callrobinson.com, and that is a website, and so that's where it could be. But guys, I certainly appreciate it. I felt like I overtalked. But I hope some of this helps out to any young attorneys or old attorneys or middle-aged attorney, whatever it may be that wants to go down that road, because it's certainly doable. You just got to put a little thought into it and a whole lot of work.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's very encouraging to hear other attorneys and their stories and see the success that they've had because they've had the courage to put themselves out there and to actually do it. So we appreciate you coming on today.
Oh gosh, thank you for the invitation, and I'm here if you guys ever need me again to babble on for 30 minutes. Call me anytime.
Love it. Well, we may take you up on that to start digging deeper into a couple more specific topics, but we are the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast. Thomas, where can folks go to find us?
Best way to find us is by going to YouTube and searching for Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast. You can also find the podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys, and we will see everybody next time.
All right, see you guys.